Hausa as Fulani cattle rearers, illiterates, Boko Haram terrorists, you know. So by this kind of calling, you know, this kind of feeling they yeah. Okay, I leave my fourth story now, our fifth story, which is South Sudan. South Sudan civil war since December 2013. Now you see these two people, Riek Machar on the left, and then Salva Kiir on the right. You're probably already familiar with this picture, right? Well, okay, Riek Machar, I would say, very important footnotes. He's a Nuer, and Salva Kiir, who is a Dinka. Okay, and Machar used to serve at first used to serve as the vice president of President Salva Kiir. But then there's a conflict, and then it's abolished. The vice president is abolished, and then every time when they have peace negotiations, they restore the status of him as vice president, and then maybe shortly after, then broke out again, and then the vice president is abolished again. So these are repeating several times, and the story is very interesting. Okay, this South Sudan, many of its current happening puzzle. I just can't figure out why and how is it possible that people like this. And then I go back to Ivan Pritchard, a very well-known British anthropologist, and then wrote several books on this area, and have a book on the Nuer. Okay, yeah. According to Ivan Pritchard's 1940 book published in 1940, the Nuer description, contiguous Dinka and the Nuer tribe, their social relationship is one of hostility, and its expression is in warfare. The Dinka people are the immemorial enemies of the Nuer. Almost always the Nuer have been the aggressors, and the raidings the Dinka is conceived by them to be normal state of affairs and a duty. And to this day, the Dinka has always lived by robbery, and the Nuer by war. As soon as youths, this is very important, as soon as youths have been initiated into manhood, they begin to plan an attack to enrich themselves and to establish their reputation as warriors. Well, every Nuer tribe raid Dinka at least every 2 or 3 years, sometimes more frequent. Okay, this is before 1940. I observed that. Captives, women of marriageable age, boys and girls were not redistributed, but they take captive of this. Okay. I missed some detail. Their operation war are always objected to rob thousands of cattle. But another target after the cattle is children. Okay, they bring children back. Do I miss some friend? Here. It's here. So they take, and then for long history, with this kind of raid, older women, and babies considered why. It's very difficult to handle someone. Are chopped to death, and the body thrown to the top of the hut and burned. the village. They finally burn the village, and they loot to take the cattle, and particularly children. Children is also very important. With the cattle, and then they killed all those adult men, and they including the babies, they cut to death, and the old woman cut to death, and throw the bodies to the top of the hut, and then burn the village. So that's their standard practice. Okay. Then for those abducted women, sexual intercourse is taboo on a rape. Sexual intercourse is taboo on a rape. Nor may Nuer eat with the captive. Only when an ox has been sacrificed, there's a ceremony. Only after this ceremony, in honor of the ghost, and may Nuer, have sexual relations with the captives, or eat with them. So before that ceremony, they are not touched. They are not touched. But this is the practice. Okay, the Nuer and the Dinka. Well. Okay, yes, I come back from this. Okay, yes, okay. Okay, according to Ivan Prechas, Nuer show greater hostility toward, that's the Prechas explanation. Nuer show greater hostility toward and more persistently attack the Dinka, who are in every respect the most akin to themselves. Dinka, around the neighbors, Dinka are most akin to themselves. Nuer make war against the people who have a culture like their own, rather than among themselves or against the peoples with cultures very different from their own. So that's Ivan Prechas' explanation. That's another ethnic group, but they are very alike in all cultural or ways of life, mostly alike to that. So showing hostility and raiding them will direct the hostilities of Nuer against Nuer. So that's one function for this. So there are some other neighboring ethnic like Shilluk, who has a well-organized, powerful kingdom. Nuer rarely raid them, and they give a reason because they don't have cattle. They have no cattle, so they raid those who have cattle. The Nuer did not raid the Mula people open. The Mula now is also conflicting with the current Sudan, South Sudan civil war. Nuer continued to raid Anuak group up to 30 years ago. 30 years before 1940. Okay, when they obtained the rivals from Abyssinia and were better able to resist and even to take the offensive. So now we just at the beginning of the 20th century, the rivals and modern weapons begin to change some the balance between them. Okay, now I will explain this. It sounds very savage, right? But many of these elements are widely recurrent, in many other civilizations. For example, like cattle hustling, cattle stealing. Then I checked that it happened in Australia, settlers, and American settlers, and in almost any of Asian or African herdsmen, groups. Actually, it's a very widely happening. Cattle. That's why the Americans ranch owner will stigma the cattle, right? So that they can find if they are still or something they can find, because these cattle stealing, cattle hustling are widely common sometimes in a small group, several hundred cattle, sometimes big in the big groups, several thousand. And sometimes, for example, happening in Nuer and Dinka, the Dinka will claim several thousand cattle are being looted, but the other side said maybe this is exaggeration. But then, whenever possible, Dinka will have an action to take back or looting back the cattle. So these kind of things, cattle hustling, happen widely. Okay, and then another practice, looting of children and a woman. Okay, I'm raising here. You probably already know this. At the beginning of Roman expansion, that's the 4 or 5 centuries before Christ. At the first age of Roman expansion, Rome was a city quickly enlarged, but mostly by men. Just like Taiwan, the first settlers in Taiwan are overwhelmingly male, right? 罗汉咖，对不对？罗汉咖，然后女性很少。So that's why later there's some saying of 没有唐山妈等等像这个东西啊。Yeah, Roman as its beginning stage of expansion is a quickly enlarged city full of male peoples. They lacking of female or women. So they are looking for the neighbors, loot the woman. And one of its neighbor is Sabine. How far is it? It's considered wrong in Taipei, and then the Sabine is just like about in Hsinchu. Okay? So that's the first stage of Roman expansion, and the first victim fall into Rome. And then, and what they are doing to go to have an offense against the Sabine? Nothing. They want loot their woman, So they have a war with the Sabine and loot their woman back. Okay. So after 3 or 5 years later, when Sabine recollect themselves, and then Sabine have the force and will to wage a war against Rome. So that's the same. So then you will see the very complicated situations. Now, the woman on this side is their fathers and their brothers, Sabine, right? But on this side, probably husband, but probably not husband, but whoever it is, it's the father of the children. You see, all those little children. So the woman, in that situation, intervene, try to stop the war. So that's an interesting, of this. Okay, now I find this very interesting thing is that I will spend a little time on this. On current ongoing South Sudan civil war, the Nuer, you find that the Nuer usually have their so-called white army come out for aggressive action. And what is white army? White army is the Nuer traditional initiation ceremony when the youth, 十几岁, maybe teenagers, youth, will cover themselves with some mud, white mud, to keep out ant or insects, something like that. So they leave outside of the tribe for independently for some time, and then show themselves the courage of warriors by invading like a Dinka tribe or something like that, and bring back some cattle, something like that. You have this kind of practice like a Maasai in Kenya, but the Maasai initiation, we have talked with Maasai people and said that they will have a long several weeks of leaving of the tribes and then prove themselves capable of living independently. A group appeared, 就是同年龄的，大概同2、3岁之内的那个appear, a group appeared, and they said that several of them died of illnesses during those years. And then finally, they will have a lion hunt. There was a lion hunt to kill some male lion and bring back the lion killed or something like to prove their the courage. So this is initiations of Maasai. Finally, to kill lions, but for Nuer, this initiation including to raid some other tribe and bring back cattle. So then, but till now, they called it White Army. And then what they do now, they sometimes will go into towns or something like that and kill some dozen people, commit that kind of atrocities. And then for revenge, and the other side have the back, or itself is the government military. Okay, so immediate revenge was that in several towns you will have that a greater scale of massacre, herding people together and divide them, separate them with ethnicity and kill the Nuers. That's the way of today's South Sudan civil war. And to me, what puzzled me, if I was the chief of a gangster gang, or if I was the chief person of a tribe of a clan in China, there's sometimes have a feud between clans, right? In traditional China. If I were the chief person of a clan or a gang, I would be very worrisome of my youngsters to do such kind of random things or things that will cause unpredictable revenge to my gang or to my clan, right? So I would be strictly forbidden and anything like that because of the worried outcome. But see the Nuer rebels, generals, when they talk about these Nuer White Army, sometimes they just say, yes, they are ours or something like that, and have no such kind of worry or something like that. So that's puzzling me, and that's still happening, in this way. That's sometimes you have to go back to our more deep back tradition to understand this kind of things. Otherwise, you cannot understand it. Yeah. Okay, my last slide. Okay, South Africa. Well, I'm really concerned about the South Africa future. But firstly, we have to understand South Africa's many racisms, including the colonial racism, apartheid racism, and racism against the white communities, which now is very much the case, and then racism against Asian, Indian, and Jewish communities. So the racism currently being discussed like black poverty because of a lack of black land ownership. So now the current big issue in South Africa will be land reform. But the land reform very likely has high possibility of a form is expropriation without compensation, so-called. Now they are revising constitution to implement that. So it's very complicated in terms of argument. And then on the other hand, you have the objection saying that the only conceivable possible explanation for any discrepancies in the outcome between ethnic groups is racism, or is this kind of argument itself is a racist one. Okay, very complicated situation. Okay, now briefly review. Before the end of apartheid in 1994, European settlers dispossessed the indigenous population of their land, and then But one thing very important. This is not today the majorities of Bantu tribes, which come about the same time as European. So this is another something. Those native indigenous. In 1913, the Native Land Act was signed, which saw the majority of South African land reserved for whites or Europeans. In the 1960s, a series of laws were signed which called the Group Areas Act, restricted the movement of the black and forced the black people to live in the township. Township is more less developed urban area and work only in certain areas. So this is the background. Today in South Africa, white people still own 73% of private farmland, despite making up only 8% of the population. Okay, now the following is the different points of currently the political state. Current president after Zuma elected last year, Ramaphosa, characterized the current land situation as original sin that continues to constrain the realization of potentiality of our people. The parliament now has agreed to re-examine the constitutional clause on land reform that include the possibility of allowing expropriation without compensation. Okay. Then the economic freedom fighters, currently the third largest party is a far left political party founded by Julius Malema, who is a figure usually inflamed with hate speech and convicted by his hate speech. But I will talk about this later. This party is founded in 2013, proposing to expropriate stolen land, nationalize the mining and the banking sectors, double welfare grants, etc. And then their Democratic Alliance, the leading opposition party, is resolutely against the land expropriation without compensation. This is in response to the African National Congress, the ruling party, and the EFF's recent attempt to change Section 25 of the Constitution, which deals with land reform. The Democratic Alliance says that the changing of Constitution will open the floodgates and undermine property rights. The African National Congress, the ruling party, battle against the VA with the populist campaign. No land, no house, no vote. So ruling party now is has its own populist campaign against the largest opposition party. So that's the current situation. Okay, now the situation, the peculiar violence, in Africa now. As we said, Africa now has a very high homicide rate, right? Over 33 per 100,000, yeah. According to the media report, approximately over 3,000 South African farmers, of course, white farmers, have been killed in this attack. In 2012, Reuters reported that the number of farmers of the European descent have deceased by 1/3 since 1997. And that news headlines about the farm killings provide incentive for them to sell their properties. Now it's this is quite alarming situation. So these white farmers now are looking for go out to Australia, New Zealand, Canada, or some other place. Interestingly, so how about what is this kind of thing? South African statistical official statistics, call them just robbery. Okay, just robbery. But on the other hand, it is claimed that this is hate crimes against white farmers, or the right wing calling it a white genocide. The right wing slaughter. So the robbery, each side, for example, like those who are speaking to euphemize this situation, saying that this is only robbery, and then in South Africa, there's in the whole, the situation is not good, and the most victims of those crimes of robbery or this such kind of violence are still blacks, right? So that's that's only robbery. But on the other hand, I think I have enough friend to say on this. Okay. Okay. This is the next one. On the other hand, if you interview the survivor or something like that, the white farmers, they will tell you the ways of torture and murder tells that this is not common problem. For example, like there's a news instance, a 12 years old boy was placed in a bathtub of boiling water. So he's killed by that way. When they came to separate the skin from his body, and when this is talked about, going to the media, and they say that it doesn't matter because he's white, something like that. These kind of things, the way the tortures are, those white farmers insist that this is not common robberies, and very commonly it happened like that. On the farm, there are some black workers, and the black workers are killed, and then the farm owners, they are not killed by one shot or a stab. No, they are usually going through torture. And then, so that's why they are arguing like that. So then we find that there's hate speech bill in South Africa. So you believe that the things should not, because this is something happening in this, but it's echoing the inflammatory hate speech by the politician, right? Inflammatory, But then you find that there's a hate speech bill. So, probably things are not that bad because, but then quickly the white farmers will tell you this is totally double standard. And then you look on the hate speech bill, just like themselves. More convict white people's using cursing or something like on black. Then the first case and probably more cases are this. But the white farmers are saying that you still have those kind of party leaders or something like that. Inflamed with hate speech and goes without any consequence. So they raise, like Julius Malema, you have many of YouTube pictures of how is his inflammatory speech, and another party, Black First Land First Party, BLF. Calling for the death of white people, yet walk around free as a bird, knowing that they are untouchable. Okay. My final friend, almost. The future of South Africa. The future of South Africa. Okay. I have quite a pessimistic view. South Africa till now still they have the best infrastructure in whole Africa's economy. They have till now still has the highest per capita GDP in all Africa. Till now, he is still number one, but he's plagued with this and the hatred and the world seems and the democracy and the populist mood, I can see they are moving along a way which we already have many precedent instances for wars and occasion or wars and situation. I'm raising several of the great famine happened in 20th century. Okay.